So here's a thought. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. Perfectionism, the royal interrupter of what we do, what we accomplish, and how we visualize things. So let's get right to it. I'm going to invite you to drop the thought of being perfect, mainly because I want you to finish this yoga teacher training. And if you're wrapped up in being so perfect, it will take you much, much longer than you would like. So drop that aside and let's take a look at this. Being in yoga is not about being perfect. We truly believe that you are absolutely perfectly imperfect, and everything you do is about your authenticity and your organic self. What makes a masterful yoga teacher, and even more importantly, you as a masterful person, is not perfectionism. Matter of fact, there's no such thing as perfectionism. And if you live life in the space of seeking perfectionism, it will interrupt your progress. So let's take a look at this dirty 13-letter word, perfectionism. One of the problems with perfectionism is that it's common to believe it's a positive thing. We live in society where people tend to value it. The thought is that if you are someone that aims for perfection, it must mean that you must be accomplished, driven, smart, or any of those things. Let's chat about the psychological ideas that may ease the stress of perfection. Rethink what it means to be average. In our society, we often consider things less than greatness to be failure. And that's not an exaggeration. It's just the reality of our false notions of achievement and what achievement truly means. So when we hear the terms average or mediocre, we consider them to be failure or bad. Know this, if you're average at something, that's great, and it shouldn't have any correlation whatsoever on your success or self-worth. Most people are average at most things for most of their lives. Does that mean that most people should feel bad about themselves or that they are failures? Accepting the way in which you are average doesn't mean you can't strive to achieve greatness in some areas of your life. All it means is that the desire to excel doesn't need to be driven by the feeling that you are incomplete or not perfect. Wanting to excel can be out of the love of competing with something in your past self, or the need to serve your community more, or even just the enjoyment of a personal challenge in the present moment, in the here now. Challenge the all or nothing belief. Perfectionism is a direct result of black and white thinking, which can be a little bit boring, right? When we believe that our value is completely tied to our achievements, we cannot help but obsessively try to do everything the right way, because any mistake would undermine our entire self-worth. And that's just such nonsense, and what a waste of your time. We can also see this when we look for the one perfect moment to get started on something. Or when we put all our efforts into one project and neglect our health, our life balance, well-being, or even our happiness. Maybe when we evaluate our lives against these little boxes that we tick off of what success or failure, like passing a test, getting into the school of our choice, making a certain amount of money, and things like that. So I invite you that when you see this type of thinking, challenge it and replace it with healthy explanations and actions. For example, maybe you believe that you are either being productive or lazy. When you're being productive, you are not being lazy. And when you are lazy, you aren't being productive. Start to challenge that idea with a better thought. Sometimes you're lazy and sometimes you're productive, and they both serve so many purposes. Both are 100% reinvigorating, rewarding, and need no justification and no judgment by you or by anyone else. Here's an interesting one. Think to become friends with what you don't know. Another key trait of perfectionism is that you have a need to control outcomes. If things don't turn out the way you want, it's an epic fail. But the real deal is that we may have a fear of things not going the way we want or expect. Perfectionism creates stress. For example, we may believe that if things don't go the way we anticipate, everything will fall apart. We will lose out on opportunities, or we will be criticized by others. Well, that's silly. How fun is it not to control an outcome and see just how it goes? Set yourself free and say boo to controlling outcomes. Remember, yoga, the here now. One way we can counteract this attitude is by becoming more comfortable with the unknown. Maybe journal about your fears. Worries about the future are exaggerated by the brain. And if you can start to gain more control over your emotions when you set yourself free and let go of controlling outcomes. It may also help to practice setting a wide range of goals with varied levels of difficulty. Meeting the easier goals should fulfill your need to be in control and achieve, and working toward the more difficult goals will simply be a challenge to be creative, go above and beyond, and enjoy the uncertainty of things that you feel are out of your control. For example, in this yoga teacher training, if your written exercises are easier to do than your videotaping, go for the written exercises first and do your video last, or vice versa. How would it feel to go easy on yourself and know that whatever you send into us, we will love, respect, and help you on your journey, not criticize or judge? Shift your thought process. Let the little mistakes be your human, beautiful self and show it in your voice and in your actions. Become friends with what you don't love. Perfectionism is largely tied to the relationship you have with what you don't accept or like about yourself. You probably know that acceptance is at the root of love, right? It's therefore not surprising that people often advise you to love yourself first when you're dealing with internal conflict or judging yourself. And I know it sounds really simple, but it's never that easy, unfortunately. So I'm going to propose something more manageable. Become friends with what you don't love. If there are parts of yourself or your experience that you can't accept to bring yourself to love, just make friends with them. You don't have to be best friends with them, but work towards acceptance. Ease into changing the relationship you have with these harder to accept parts of yourself, and over time, you'll see a shift in your perspective that calms your anxiety around them. For example, maybe you have anxiety and it creates internal conflict. And then with the internal conflict that it creates, more anxiety is created. So think this. Your anxiety is just a part of your brain that's trying to help you. And once you begin to accept your anxiety over time, you may recognize and accept it as something that is actually helping you. choose your observance of yourself a little differently. Reassess how you measure your success. If your perfectionism is driven by the belief that you're not successful enough, it could be that the way you're measuring success needs to be reassessed. Does that make sense? For example, it's common that we compare ourselves to others, right? We always do. And while we're often told to focus on ourselves, making social comparisons in specific situations, such as our workplace, maybe a competitive environment or competitive sports, or the way we look at ourselves compared to our friends. Maybe if we didn't make these comparisons, it would be difficult to see how we were improving and in what roles we could most help ourselves. But be careful and be very objective. Find your authenticity as opposed to your perfectionism. Because it's really important that you know that comparison is dangerous ground. A yoga class is a perfect example. When you compare yourself to someone in front of you in a yoga class who you think is doing a pose better than you or looks perfect, it's not a good thing. And newsflash, there is no such thing as a perfect yoga pose. Yoga is internal. It's a feeling. So you have to let go of comparisons if you are going to live a yogic lifestyle, right? When you start to compare yourself to other things, that's when it becomes a problem. If you start to tell yourself that so-and-so's life is better than yours or that he or she is more successful than you, blah, 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 why don't you truly consider this? What makes a life better? What does success mean? Are we talking about financial achievements, free time, deep relationships? Take a closer look at how success could be more effectively defined in your life. My own definition of success used to be based on how well I compared to people in my life in similar spaces, such as money or relationships, maybe travel experiences, things like that. Now I see success as how well I'm able to find meaning in the present moment, stay motivated for the future, and spend my time working on something that helps me or the people I love, and also those that I can help or assist. All of the elements of my definition may not be relevant to anyone else's, but because they are reasonable and in my eyes beautiful and can grow with my personality, they prevent me from falling into the habit of perfectionism. I tend not to think about perfectionism at all anymore because I'm here to serve. So to bring this all full circle, consider this. You can be average in one area and successful in another. This doesn't mean you don't have value or you're not worthy of love or respect and don't deserve some downtime every once in a while. Being average is normal, and it's not an indicator of worth. You need to recognize this. You have inherent value just as you are. And if you should want to obsess about a project or be a little bit of a perfectionist every now and then, that's fine. But be driven by the love of the creative process itself, not the anxiety that you can never do enough or that you're not good enough. Or more importantly, and this is important, what others may expect of you and the feeling that you are not good enough based on their thoughts, actions, ideas of you, or their judgments, because that's just gross. You have to let that go, and you have to ignore those expectations of others. You know what's right for you, and you know who you are. So be you and not what someone wants you to be. And furthermore, let's not even get into the aspect of the stupid concept of I don't have time, because that's another lecture altogether. So you can set that thought aside. So what does it mean to be a perfectionist? What are the traits? Perfectionists obsess over mistakes, even when it's not likely that anyone even noticed. Their self-confidence depends on being perfect. They think in black and white. Things are either good or bad, perfect or failure. They have unrealistic expectations and crazy high standards for themselves, and beat themselves up when they don't meet them. They put up a front that everything is perfect, even when it's not. Because the thought of someone else seeing their imperfection is absolutely and completely unbearable. Despite their quest for perfection, they don't feel anywhere close to being perfect. They can't accept being second best at something. To them, that's failure. They spend excessive time on projects because there's always one last thing that they're trying to perfect. They spend a lot of time searching for external approval. External approval is very important to them. Now, no matter what they do, they don't feel good enough. Do any of these statements describe you? How would it make you feel to be okay with being average, with being you? Perfection does not describe your self-worth. Can you accept that you are enough? This is yoga. This is being in yoga. So, some thoughts to consider. Change your beliefs. Once you identify a limiting belief, such as I'm not good enough, you can start to change it by looking for evidence to support the opposite belief. I am good enough. I am good at. I excel in. Find the capacity to shine from within and exude joy. More importantly, feel good about yourself. And when you access your inner spark, everything will shift to I am good enough. Challenge your thoughts. While you can identify evidence to support a new belief, it's likely you'll get stuck in ingrained thought patterns from time to time. It's a process, not a one-time choice. Maybe your mind will occasionally formulate reasons you are not good enough. Of course, that's normal. You aren't where you should be professionally. You didn't respond to a conflict wisely. You reacted too emotionally. But as often as you can, try to catch these thoughts and challenge them with compassion, with love. So think this from what I said. There's nowhere you should be professionally, and you've done a lot more than you can give yourself credit for. You could have responded better to that conflict, but that's okay. This is an opportunity for growth. You reacted emotionally, but that's okay too. You're not a robot, and at least you're self-aware enough to recognize when there's room for improvement. You may not catch every self-critical thought. But over time, you'll catch more and more, and tiny bits of progress add up. Slow your thoughts. It's all well and good to challenge thoughts, but if they're coming at you hard, you'll probably end up feeling too overwhelmed to be effective. So I've come up with a list of mindful practices that are super simple and easy that can help you find relief from your loud, persistent inner monologue that goes on all the time. These are ones that I've found to be most effective, and I can do them really easily and really quickly. 5 minutes of traditional meditation or deep breathing. A 5 to 10 minute walk, focusing on my senses and the experience of being in nature. A yoga class or 5 to 10 minutes of deep stretching and syncing it with my breath. Of course, listening to music, that's an easy one. Anything that gets me into a state of flow, like just swaying or moving, maybe even dancing. Take a little time every day to clear your thoughts, and it will be a lot easier to tame the fear-based voice that makes you feel bad about yourself. Change for the right reasons. Growth provides you with a sense of possibility and purpose. Always think to reinvent yourself, even if it's just a new cooking recipe. And here's a really big one. Take power back from others. Think this. Focus a little more on you and a little less on approval. Even better, focus a little more on the person in front of you. Think about the goddess Kali, who says, I can like me even if you don't. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. Namaste.